Welcome to Session 1 of our Anxiety Management course. We hope that this course will provide you with a better understanding of anxiety and how it affects the way we think, feel and behave. We also hope to teach you some effective strategies and techniques to enable you to better manage your symptoms of anxiety. The strategies provided in this course are based on cognitive behavioural therapy principles. Cognitive behavioural therapy is an evidence-based treatment for anxiety as well as other common mental health problems. It helps us to understand the unhelpful patterns in our thinking and behaviour which keep our problems going and allows us to explore and develop better coping skills. The course is made up of 6 sessions. This session is an introduction to the course which focuses on getting to know what anxiety is, how it can affect us, and we'll also introduce the idea of a vicious circle of anxiety. In the second part of this session, we'll also look at some of the things that you can do to get started on managing anxiety. In Session 2, we will focus on the physical symptoms of anxiety, or what we call the fight or flight response, and look at ways to manage these symptoms primarily through the use of controlled breathing exercises, progressive muscular relaxation and imaginal relaxation. Session 3 focuses on the role of unhelpful thoughts in feeding anxiety and keeping the vicious circle of anxiety going. We will also discuss some techniques to tackle unhelpful thoughts with the aim of reducing our anxiety levels and weakening the vicious circle. Session 4 of the course concentrates on the unhelpful behaviours that we can sometimes develop to enable us to cope with anxiety, but that actually only serve to keep it going, namely avoidance, underactivity and overactivity. We will also discuss some useful strategies to help you to manage these unhelpful behaviours and by doing so weaken the vicious circle. In Session 5, we focus specifically on panic and how to deal with panic attacks. If you experience anxiety, then it is likely that you will have experienced a panic attack at some point. If you would like to understand better what panic is and how to manage it, then this session may be helpful for you. Finally, Session 6 looks at worry, rumination and practical problem solving. Often people who are anxious think that worrying and ruminating are helping them to deal with problems, or that by worrying they are better preparing themselves for adverse outcomes. There are lots of misconceptions about worry, and in Session 6 we will discuss some of these. Session 6 also covers practical problem solving as a way of tackling worries about current problems. The aim of problem solving is to allow you to take a proactive approach to the worries that may be overwhelming you and contributing to your anxiety. Before continuing with the course, you may wish to take a moment to consider the following points. Firstly, managing anxiety takes commitment and hard work. Do you feel that you are ready to do this? Also, the course works best if you commit to doing the homework tasks between sessions. You may wish to think about if and how you can make time in your life to practice these tasks. Okay, so now that you have a better understanding of the course, let's get started with Part 1. What is anxiety? It can be a common question, and exploring it may help to normalise what you're going through. Indeed, we all experience anxiety from time to time, and it can be helpful to us in certain situations, which we will discuss in more detail later. But for some of us, anxiety can become overwhelming and debilitating, sometimes to the point that we feel as though we are losing control over our lives. These next few slides will help to shed some light on how we may define anxiety. Consider the following questions. Are you constantly worried, tense or on edge? Do you find it difficult to relax or switch off? Do you feel like things are getting on top of you? Do you find yourself avoiding everyday tasks because they make you feel anxious? Do you experience unpleasant physical sensations such as butterflies in your stomach, muscular tension, dizziness and breathlessness? Do you feel like danger and doom are around every corner? If you answered yes to most or all of these questions, then it is likely that you're experiencing anxiety. Let's look at some of the common signs and symptoms of anxiety. Many people who experience anxiety find it very difficult to relax or to switch off, even when they're in an environment that they do not necessarily find stressful, for example at home or on holiday. This is a meerkat. Meerkats are always on the lookout for threats to their well-being, and this is what we tend to do when we're anxious. We tend to think that we are surrounded by danger and potential threats and feel on edge because of this. When we are anxious, we often experience muscular tension in our head, neck, shoulders, and other places, which can lead to aches and pains. Excessive sweating is another really common symptom of anxiety, and this can be a source of discomfort and embarrassment for many people. People who experience anxiety often notice their heart racing or beating very fast. This can be distressing for many people, especially if they do not know why this is happening. We will consider the reasons for this in session 2 of the course. Anxiety can also trigger changes in appetite, whether this be an increase in appetite or a loss of appetite. Nausea is another very common symptom of anxiety. Some people find that they experience butterflies or a knot in their stomach. Anxiety is often fueled by worrying thoughts. These worries tend to be about everything and anything, from work to our health to not getting enough sleep. Some people may even find that they worry about worrying too much. Often we replay these worrying thoughts in our head over and over again, which only serve to cause us more distress. Many people who experience anxiety find it hard to get a good night's sleep. This may be related to excessive worrying thoughts and difficulties with relaxing and unwinding prior to bedtime. Sometimes anxiety can make us think that something very bad is going to happen and that this is just around the corner. Often when we are anxious, we can become distracted by our worrying thoughts. This can affect our ability to concentrate. Lack of sleep can also contribute to difficulties with concentration. One of the main unhelpful behaviours that we often adopt as a way of helping us to cope with anxiety is avoidance. It is a natural response to avoid the people, situations and places that cause us to feel anxious. And although in the short term avoidance can help to reduce our anxiety levels, in the longer term it just perpetuates the vicious circle of anxiety as we continually undermine our ability to cope. Similarly, when we are anxious in certain situations, we tend to try to escape from these situations. This is because we begin to associate escaping from difficult situations with a reduction in our symptoms of anxiety. However, escaping from difficult situations merely undermines our ability to cope and does not give us a chance to see that even if we stayed in the situation that made us feel anxious, our symptoms would still reduce. Another common behaviour that people may engage in as a way of coping with their symptoms of anxiety is to use alcohol to give them Dutch courage in certain situations. This can become problematic and lead to even more difficulties. Having looked at some of the common signs and symptoms of anxiety, take a few moments to consider the ways in which anxiety affects you. You may wish to note these down on the worksheet entitled, "How does anxiety affect you?" Anxiety can affect us in 4 main ways, and each can influence the others. It affects our body, our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviour. Let's look at an example of how this can happen. Cameron is at work. When he finishes the task he's working on, his boss says, "That's fine, Cameron, but can you try and do it a bit quicker next time?" Walking away, he can feel his muscles tensing as he goes bright red. He starts to think, was that slow? Why am I so rubbish at this? Why can't I get it right? He starts to worry that he'll get sacked and that his family will get into debt. He can't stop worrying about it, and he develops a headache. He starts making mistakes in his job. By the end of the day, he's still tense and has started to feel sick as well. From this example, we can see how anxiety affects Cameron's thoughts as he thinks to himself, was that slow? Why am I so rubbish at this? Why can't I get it right? I'll get sacked and then my family will get into debt. It also affects his feelings as he becomes embarrassed and starts to worry about what might happen if he loses his job. It affects his body as his muscles tense, he gets headaches and he starts to feel sick. And it also affects his behaviour as he starts to make mistakes which affect his performance at work. Let's look at the vicious circle of anxiety. As we've just seen from Cameron's example, when we experience a situation or event that we perceive to be anxiety-provoking or stressful, it can lead to unhelpful thoughts, unhelpful feelings, both physical and emotional, and unhelpful behaviours. And each of these can influence the others to keep the vicious circle going. If we slot Cameron's example into the vicious circle, we can see that Cameron's vicious circle kickstarts itself when his boss comments on his performance at work. It is easy to see how the circle can be kept going by the unhelpful thoughts and behaviours that ensue. An important point to make here, however, is that we can find ways to weaken the vicious circle by making changes to the way that we think and behave. This can be difficult because much of what we think and do is automatic and habitual. We often aren't aware of it. Therefore, to change automatic thoughts and actions, we have to firstly identify them and also when we do them, so that we know what to change. It might be helpful to pause and take a moment to consider what kind of thoughts and behaviours keep your vicious circle going. To help us to begin to identify our unhelpful thoughts and behaviours and the situations in which they occur, we use what's called an anxiety diary, like the one shown here. Again, we have used Cameron's example to show you how you might go about completing one of these. For every situation that makes us feel anxious, we will experience some unhelpful thoughts, feelings and behaviours. It is helpful to begin to record these as and when they happen. Using the worksheet entitled Anxiety Diary, you may wish to record a situation that made you feel anxious and note down some of the thoughts that were going through your mind at that time, how you felt, and how you behaved or reacted to that situation. It may be difficult to remember how you felt and what thoughts were going through your mind. This is to be expected. That's why it's important to try to complete your diary as soon as possible following the situation that triggered your anxiety. We will now move on to part 2 of the session. Before we look at how we can start to weaken the vicious circle of anxiety, we will briefly consider some of the causes of anxiety. A question that many people often ask themselves is, why me? Why do I have to experience the symptoms of anxiety? There is no short answer to this question, as the causes of anxiety are often complex. There are many different reasons why we may experience anxiety, and depending on our genetic makeup, childhood factors, social background, and events in our lives, we may be more or less prone to experiencing higher levels of anxiety than other people. Studies suggest that we can indeed be genetically predisposed to anxiety, what we may call a born worrier. However, this does not mean that we will definitely develop anxiety. Early traumatic experiences or stressful life events may trigger anxiety, as well as the behaviour that we learned in childhood from those around us. If we had an anxious parent or caregiver, for example, then we may have learned from them that going to a busy shop or speaking in front of others is something to be feared. What is important to remember is that anxiety affects us all and is a completely normal reaction that all human beings experience from time to time when faced with stressful situations. In fact, a certain amount of anxiety can actually be helpful and indeed motivating for us. For example, to help us perform well at a job interview or to help us to win a race. Let's take a moment to look at why anxiety can be helpful for us. Well, when we perceive a particular situation as threatening or challenging, we experience a strong emotion called fear. Fear triggers a chain of automatic events in our body to ensure that we are able to deal with the threat or challenge that confronts us. When this happens, the body produces a hormone called adrenaline, which triggers a range of physical symptoms in our body that prepare us to either run away or to be ready to react. This physical reaction is called our fight or flight response and can be traced back to our need for survival in the past. This response is a natural defence response that all human beings have, and in some situations when there are real threats around, for example, if we walk out onto the road in front of a car, it can help us to become alert and to respond quickly. The problem is when we experience this response when there is no real danger or threat around, for example, in a busy shop or on the bus. For 1 in 5 of us, anxiety can become overwhelming, enduring and constant, and negatively impact on our ability to function properly on a day-to-day basis. This is when anxiety becomes a problem. There are 3 main things which keep anxiety going, namely association, anticipation and avoidance. When you become anxious in one setting, you may find that you start reacting in the same way in similar places, for example, busy shopping centres. This is what we call association. If you've been anxious in some situations, it's natural to worry about it happening again. Worrying about things ahead of time can make things worse, and this is what we call anticipatory anxiety. And avoidance is when we do not face up to the things that make us feel anxious. If we keep avoiding our fears, we are unlikely to overcome them. Okay, so let's turn our attention to some of the things that we can do initially to help us to manage anxiety. The first thing we can do is to limit the amount of caffeine that we drink. Caffeine is a stimulant that affects the brain and central nervous system. It can be found in a range of products and drinks, namely tea, coffee, fizzy juice. Too much caffeine, however, can leave us feeling nervous, irritable, restless, agitated, shaky, give us headaches, increase our heart rate, and speed up our breathing. All of the symptoms that you would perhaps experience if you were anxious. If you're someone who drinks lots of caffeine, then wean yourself off of it slowly and gradually so as to reduce any withdrawal effects. Alcohol is something that we mentioned earlier when we spoke of unhelpful coping behaviours. Many people with anxiety use alcohol to calm their nerves. However, the problem is that if you drink to cope with anxiety, then you may begin to depend on it. Symptoms such as nausea, sweating, shaking may be more to do with alcohol than anxiety. Drinking too much alcohol will mess up your sleep and make you more prone to anxiety. If you're someone who uses alcohol to cope with anxiety, then you may want to think about these points. If you would like further help or information regarding your alcohol intake, then you may wish to contact your GP. Getting a good night's sleep is also important when it comes to anxiety management. Although anxiety often leads to sleep trouble, lack of sleep can leave us feeling even more anxious the next day. Try to get into a regular routine of going to bed and getting up at the same time every day. Don't spend any more than 8 hours in bed. Try to put the day to rest in the early part of the evening. Make a to-do list and deal with any problems or worries that you have well before bedtime. And try to relax for at least 90 minutes before bedtime. Listen to music, read, do a word puzzle, anything that will help you to unwind. Regular exercise is extremely important, not only for our physical well-being, but also for our psychological well-being too. Evidence suggests that 30 minutes of moderate exercise over 5 days in the week can reduce levels of the body's stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, and also stimulates the production of serotonin and endorphins, which are the body's natural mood elevators. So exercise not only helps to reduce our anxiety levels, it can also help us to feel good. Exercise is considered to be moderate when your heart rate is slightly elevated, but you're still able to hold a conversation. If you're someone who has never exercised or who has not exercised for a while, then don't worry, just take it at your own pace. Start off with small amounts of exercise and build on this. You do not have to join a gym to become more active. Exercise can include a range of different activities, such as cycling, playing football, jogging, going to a dance class or aerobics class, swimming, doing weights, playing golf or other sports. Try doing something that you enjoy. Going for a brisk walk is as good as anything. Take the dog with you. Walk Glasgow is a project that offers fun, interesting and free walks around the Glasgow area and caters to all fitness levels. It is a gentle way of introducing some physical activity into your life, as well as allowing you to meet new people in the area. More information about the project is available from the Glasgow Life website at www.glasgowlife.org.uk. There is also something called the Live Active scheme, which is available through your GP if you think that you could benefit from being more active but have difficulty in doing so because of your health. If you would like to find out about this scheme, then speak to your GP. If you have a medical condition, then contact your GP to find out what will be a safe amount of exercise for you. We have now reached the end of session 1. We hope that you will have found this session helpful. Remember that managing anxiety takes time and hard work. It is important that you practice the new skills taught throughout the course to gain the most benefit. Many small steps can lead to a big change, so be patient with yourself and keep your expectations realistic. Remember that some anxiety is good for us and that we do not want to rid ourselves completely of anxiety. What we want to do is to manage the symptoms of anxiety so that we can live our lives the way we wish to do without feeling restricted or overwhelmed by our symptoms. Over the next week, you may wish to record times when you feel anxious. What happened? What thoughts, feelings and behaviours did you experience? You may also wish to make a start on getting rid of the things that make anxiety worse. Try to incorporate 30 minutes of exercise into your day over 3 days next week. In the next session, we will look at how anxiety affects the body.